Well, it's been 6 months since we ditched gas and we went full time to the heat pump. That includes a full UK winter and quite a glorious spring. Still think heat pumps don't work when it's cold? Well, let's put that to bed. Let's look at what it really cost us and how comfortable we've been and whether I'd do it again. So for those of you that are new to the channel, back in November, we partnered with Octopus Energy to have our heat pump installed. And if you haven't seen the videos, there is a full 5-part series, which I'll link in the description below. But the short version of that is they did a fantastic job. They came in, everything went to plan, and by the 4th day, we were up and running with our heat pump. So full credit to Octopus. I think they did a fantastic job of that. Now, for those that don't know, we already have a relatively large solar and battery installation. We have about 9.6 kilowatts of panels spread across multiple aspects of our roof. We have about 37 kilowatts of battery storage, which means that we can store almost enough energy to run the heat pump even on the coldest days in the winter. Now, for those of you that haven't seen them as well, we also did an update after 30 days of owning the heat pump, again at 90 days, and today is your 180-day update. And I'm going to continue to do these updates. I'll do another one as we get to about 9 months, 3/4 of the year, and then a full year's wrap up in November. But this video is going to be broken down into 4 parts. And I'm going to put timestamps in the timeline. So if you do want to jump to any specific part, you can do. But we're going to cover the overview of the system. We'll talk a bit about the good and the bad, the things that we really like about it, some things we'd like to change about it. We'll talk about the metrics. How much does it cost to run? And I will not only give you what it costs me to run with my solar and battery system, I'll give you what it costs to run if you're on just a standard electricity tariff. And then I will also give you my real bills from 1 year ago for my gas. So you can see exactly what I spent on gas. You can see exactly what I would spend on electricity if I was just on a standard tariff. And you can see what it cost me to run with solar and batteries. And then we'll wrap up with some things I'd like to change, things I'll probably do differently once the system's been up and running for about a year. And if that sounds interesting, then hang around and we'll get into it. So let's talk about the setup of the system. The heat pump itself is a relatively large unit. This is a 6 kilowatt heat pump. It sits at the side of my house. It's about 10 to 15 meters from my neighbour's property. So there are no noise issues. But as you can probably tell by the background noise here, we live in a very quiet part of the countryside. Inside the house, we have a hot water tank. Now, again, if you're coming from a combi boiler to a heat pump, this might be an issue because you do need a hot water tank. And with a combi boiler, obviously you don't have one. And you may not have the space for one. Now, we came from an old-fashioned type of boiler, which means we already had a tank to store hot water. So it was just a case of ripping one out and replacing the other. But the installation itself took 4.5 days, really 4 days of installation and a half day of commissioning to get the system up and running. Now, during that period, we did have 2 days where we didn't have any heating at all. We had a day where we didn't have any hot water, but Octopus actually brought along a couple of small 2 kilowatt heaters that meant that for the cold night that we were potentially looking at freezing in the house in November, we were able to heat the house no problem at all. So now let's talk about the difference between living with a gas boiler, which we did for 27 years, and living with a heat pump. From day to day, there is no difference. You set the temperature on the thermostat exactly like you would have done with your gas boiler, and then you kind of just forget about it. You let it do its thing, and the house is lovely and warm. The big difference that we've noticed is that the house during the winter months was consistently warm. There were never parts of the day when it was warm and parts of the day when it was cold. The house was always at a steady 20 to 21 degrees. Then at night time, we do what's called setback, where we set the temperature back to about 17 degrees. And that means that we could sleep comfortably in rooms that weren't too hot. Hot water is almost on demand. By that I mean that when the tank starts to empty, once it drops below a certain threshold, it will automatically reheat. It doesn't wait till a specific point in the day to do the reheating, it reheats the water instantly. And that means providing you're not using, in our case, more than about 170 litres in one go, you will always have hot water available because it doesn't take very long between us finishing showering in the morning where the tank temperature might drop down to about 24, 25 degrees as it fills up with cold water, to get it back to the sort of 43 degrees that we keep it at during the day takes maybe 45 minutes to an hour. So there are a few things that you should consider if you're planning to move from a gas boiler to a heat pump, because you have to do some things slightly differently. Now, a gas boiler is very good at producing large amounts of heat very quickly. And this is why a lot of people will switch the heating off during the day, and then in the evenings, as the family starts to come home, they'll turn the gas boiler on, they'll ramp the heat up. With a heat pump, it's much more efficient to just heat the house all day long, is not turn it off, just set a temperature and forget about it. Because of the way the heat pump works, it will heat the house more slowly than a gas boiler would, which means you can't immediately get a ramp up in temperature. So if you want to increase the house from 17 to 21 degrees, instead of it taking half an hour to an hour, maybe it might take 2.5 to 3 hours for it to be able to heat the house up. So really what I'm saying here is you should plan ahead. So in the evenings, if you want it to be a little bit warmer, maybe when you sit down with a family in the evening, then think about turning the heat pump temperature up about an hour earlier than you would have done with the gas boiler. Now, we've had some problems with water pooling around our heat pump. Now, the way the heat pump works in the winter, it has what's called a defrost cycle. So this means that when there is moist air, but it's very cold, you will get ice build up on the radiator at the back of the heat pump. Now, the heat pump handles this automatically. You don't need to do anything. It will defrost its own radiator. But that water, that ice that was on the radiator, turns into water and basically gets flushed off the heat pump. Now, Octopus did build a soakaway underneath the heat pump. All the gravel you can see there is designed so that the water from that condensation flushes into the gravel and then disappears into the ground. Now, in the depths of winter, this did not work very well. Now, the reason is, and I'll put a photograph up on the screen now, is you can see that Octopus built the plinths for the heat pump to sit on, which completely go across the entire width of the soakaway. That means that all of the water that goes into that small part on the left-hand side there basically filled up and froze, and then new water that was added to the top of it just ran straight off onto the paving around there. Now, not a huge problem for us because, as I say, it is around the side of the house, but if it is near your back door, you could end up with a pooling problem. Now, there is a simple solution to this, and later this summer what I will do is just dig out that side, put a bit more gravel in, and give it a bit more soak away underneath the paving stones there. So again, just be aware of that. If they are putting in the concrete footings to put the heat pump on, make sure there's a channel around the front and back of it to allow any water that comes out of that side to move into the central part of the soakaway. Another thing that we didn't do very well was consider the positioning of the thermostat. Now, our house is set up as a single zone. That means that, the whole house stays at one consistent temperature, which is good for us. But the thermostat, where the old thermostat was, they just put the new thermostat there. That thermostat is in the hallway, right next to the front door. Now, we don't have a porch, so if somebody opens the front door in the depths of winter, the heat all goes rushing out. The problem with that is that the hallway can be cooler because, again, naturally hot air will rise, so it goes up the stairs. You open the front door, the heat rushes out. The hallway is generally one of the cooler places in the house. So that means that the thermostat being in the hallway will adjust based on the temperature in the hallway. The rest of the rooms in the house are lovely and warm, but the thermostat is turning the radiators on to heat those rooms. Now, there's two simple ways to solve this. One is you can do what's called multi-zoning, so you can have multiple thermostats around your house and you can control the temperature in different zones in the house, or you just move the thermostat, and we're probably going to move the thermostat into our main family room. Now, some other things that went wrong during the installation. There was an option to encase the external piping into a plastic box. I didn't take them up on that. I didn't think it was really necessary. Again, it being around the side of the house, no one was really going to see it. But I have noticed that the insulation that they added to the pipe, the tape that they used, the glue has started to fail, and the insulation is starting to come away at the pipes. Now, again, really simple fix, some duct tape, and I will have that fixed within the next couple of weeks. But just bear in mind, if you are going to have external piping, you might want to consider boxing it in. This just means that in this case, the sun has been shining on that black tape and has sort of broken down the glue. It might give it a bit more protection if it's all inside a nice enclosure. So there is one other thing that happens with our heat pump, and this could be specific to where I live. But just behind us over there is a large set of farmers' fields. We get a lot of blossom and just detritus blowing in on the wind, and I've noticed on the back of the heat pump there you can start to see there's bits of fluff building up on it, and it just means I need to occasionally go out there with my shop vac and just kind of hoover it off to make sure none of that fluff ends up jammed between the vanes of the radiator. But again, all really minor things. The heat pump itself has performed flawlessly for the last 6 months. Now let's talk about noise, because I've actually made a couple of videos about the noise that the heat pump makes. During the depths of winter, when it is working hard, you can definitely hear it. If I was to sit here in the garden, I'd be very cold in the depths of winter, but I might just be able to hear it. But for 99% of the year, the noise of the wind in the trees, or about 2 miles away from here is a major A road, I can generally hear that more than I can hear the heat pump. I've certainly had no complaints from any of my neighbours that it's making a lot of noise, and I know everyone will post in the comments, well, wait till it's 5 years old or 10 years old and the bearings are shot, but all of that can be covered under a maintenance contract. You still have to maintain a gas boiler. Why shouldn't you have to maintain a heat pump? But as I say, we've had no complaints from any of the neighbours. But to be honest, we never had any complaints from the neighbours about the noise our gas boiler make. And to be honest, after 27 years, our gas boiler wasn't exactly quiet. Okay, let's talk about money, because ultimately I can give you lots of stats, and I will give you lots of stats, so those of you that came for numbers, but ultimately it's about what does it cost to run. Well, just to put it into perspective, I took our gas bills from a year ago. So it's very difficult when you give up gas to go to a heat pump to be able to do a like-for-like comparison. But what I thought I'd do is I'd take the exact same months, the exact same dates in the month that we've had our heat pump, and I'll look at my old gas bills. And even if, it maybe is a little bit warmer this year, so we don't use as much heating, there's probably 5% to 10% variance in it. But our old gas bills for the period that we've had the heat pump were £824. If you were on a standard tariff, that means that you didn't have a smart meter, you were just on a bog standard tariff from Octopus, that would cost you £546 for the same period. So we spent £824 on gas, we spent £546 on electricity to run the heat pump. Now, just to put that into perspective, the heat pump used 2,200 kilowatt hours of energy. Now that sounds like a lot, but it still costs less than the equivalent gas. We were able to generate in that first half of the year 3.4 megawatts of electricity. So we used 2,200 and we generated 3,400. So you could say we were effectively able to run our heat pump for free for the entire period. Now, obviously, the house is going to use some of that. We've been exporting a lot of power recently because we don't have a use for it. But for that whole period, from the middle of November to the middle of May, it has cost us absolutely nothing to run our heat pump. Now, everyone's going to scream at me and say, well, you're not taking into account all the money you've spent on your solar system. Our solar system has been an ongoing project for 15 years. We have continually invested into it. As you can see behind me, things like solar panels on the fence. We're constantly looking at how we can generate more and more energy. Now, one of the advantages of being able to do this over a long period of time is the system has paid for itself. In fact, it's paid for itself twice and is still returning an investment. So yes, we could look into the depreciation of the assets and what happens if something went wrong. But ultimately, what I see in my bills is I used to spend £800. I now would spend £500, but because I've got a solar system, I'm not spending anything to run and heat my house. Now, I know when people look at it, they say, well, that's an awful lot of electricity for heating. But you've got to take into account, you're not paying a gas bill anymore. And, don't just look at 1 month. Everyone always wants to look at the worst case scenario. What's it going to cost to run in January when it's freezing cold? And yes, it will use a lot of electricity in January. But as you get further and further into the centre of the year, it will use less and less and less. So it's better to look at a whole year or a whole 6-month period and say, what does it cost to run if we were using gas, or what does it cost to run if we were using electricity? So just to put that into some clear numbers for you, Back in January 2024, our gas bill for that month alone, now I will give you that, we use a tiny little amount of that for cooking. We have a gas hob, but 99% of that bill was for heating and hot water. And our bill for January 2024 was £186. If we were on a standard electricity tariff, the bill for January this year would have been £145. So ultimately, what are our savings? Well, we calculate we're saving about £100 a month, averaged across the whole year. So we're not paying gas. There's £100 a month or £1,200 a year that is staying in our bank account and not going out to the energy companies. So let's talk about efficiency metrics, because there's a rumour going around, usually propagated by people who are either anti-heat pump or gas boiler engineers, that if you don't have a coefficient of performance of your heat pump of at least 4, then gas would be cheaper and you'll be losing out. So our seasonal coefficient of performance is really what you should be looking at over a longer period of time. For the 6-month period was 3.61. That means for every unit of energy that we put into our heat pump, we get 3.61 units of energy out. With a gas boiler, for every unit of energy you put in, you'll be lucky if you get 0.9 units of heat out of it. So we used 2,022 kilowatt hours of electricity, and we produced 7,308 kilowatt hours of heat. Now, have we seen any changes in the coefficient of performance? Well, there have been some minor ones. In the depths of the winter, when the heat pump is working the hardest, it's not quite as efficient. But as you start to get a little bit of warmth start to come back into the air, and don't remember, that's how a heat pump works. It doesn't create heat. It takes heat from the air, heat energy from the air, and transfers it into the house. So we've started to see the efficiency gains as we come into spring, and as we get into summer, we're expecting to see that approaching 4. Now, we could make some tweaks to the system, which would probably get us to an SCOP of 4 about now. But what I want to do is I want to run it with the system the way it was designed for at least a full year. So we'll run it up until November, and then we'll make some tweaks at that point. So as I mentioned earlier, we have solar and batteries in our house, and solar and batteries plus heat pump is absolutely the way you should run these. We've had a particularly good sort of March and April. In fact, during March and April, we only had 7 days in the entire 2-month period where we paid anything for energy at all. Every single day, other than those 7 days, the energy company was paying us. So having solar and battery means you can take advantage of smart tariffs. So it's very easy to be able to go with a tariff like Octopus Intelligent Go, where I can pull power in during the small hours of the morning. I can store it in the batteries in the garage, and then they can feed the house and the heat pump during the day without us ever having to draw any energy from the grid. So things I've learned over these last 6 months that are worth at least understanding if you're thinking about getting a heat pump is, if you're on a standard tariff, you don't have a smart meter, I would get that installed first, because that allows you to take advantage of some really low rate electricity. If you don't have solar and batteries and you're just going to be importing energy from the grid, having a smart meter gets you access to something like the Cozy Octopus tariff. This allows you to heat your heat pump with lower cost electricity at 3 different intervals during the day. But you need to have a working smart meter to be able to get access to them. Now, one of the things that's really tempting when you first get the heat pump is to go into all the settings and you start thinking about, well, what should I tweak? If you've had a good installation and the heating engineers have set your heat pump up correctly, you shouldn't have to tweak anything. There's a temptation to go in and play with what's called the energy curves. So this is what the flow temperature of the heat pump is depending on the temperature outside. I've decided I'm not going to do that, at least for the first year. I want to see if the designs that the heat pump engineers from Octopus put in place will work for us throughout the whole year. And I say we're getting an SCOP of about 3.61. I am more than happy with that. Would I like it to be a little bit more efficient? Yes, but I want to see how their design works before I make any changes. What's your thermostat placement? As I said, having ours in the hall, I think that was a big mistake. We should have had that in our family room where we spend most of our time. Check your outdoor piping. Where are they going to run the outdoor piping? Keep the runs as straight and as short as you possibly can. And if they give you the option to box them in, to give them a little bit more protection from the elements, as I say, there's no problem with our insulation on our pipes. It's just the tape they use to seal that insulation up. The glue has obviously, when it's been sitting out on a sunny day like this, has become less effective and started to fail. Now, one last thing that I might change is our almost instant hot water. So as I say, we keep our water in our tank at about 43 degrees for most days. We do heat it to 47 overnight. 43 we find is more than enough to have a nice hot shower. It never made any sense to me with a shower where you would heat the water up to 47 or 50 degrees and then you would add cold water to it to have a shower. If you've got enough hot water in the tank, then why not just use it at the temperature that you were going to use it at? 43 degrees works for us, but most of the middle of the day, we don't actually need a full tank of hot water at 43 degrees. So I might just tweak it slightly so that the temperature at which it starts to reheat is a little bit lower. So at the moment, I believe if it gets down to about 38 degrees, that starts the cycle of heating the hot water again. I'll probably drop that down to 35 or 34 degrees just to see if it makes any difference. Bearing in mind at this time of the year, we're probably using 2 kilowatt hours a day to heat our hot water. So it's not exactly expensive to heat the hot water. What do I think of it? Well, I think it's pretty obvious from most of my videos that I'm a big fan of heat pumps. But from a comfort point of view, it's not what I think, it's what does my family think. And we used to have a saying in our house. We used to have every evening somebody would say, oh, can we turn the heating up a little bit? Nobody says that anymore. Throughout the entire winter, the house never dropped below about 20 degrees. It's very comfortable. The house is at a constant temperature. It's nice when you just walk back into the house and you feel it immediately. The running cost for us with our solar and battery system has been excellent. Like I say, it's cost us almost nothing to run. Now again, not everybody has a solar and battery installation. Some people, if you do, you might not have as much battery storage as we do, but it's still going to be a lot cheaper than running a gas boiler throughout the whole year. And no matter what the gas boiler engineers and all the anti-heat pump brigade tell you, I can give you the evidence. I can tell you exactly how many kilowatt hours of energy it uses. I can tell you exactly how many kilowatt hours of heat it produces. You divide one by the other and it will give you your coefficient of performance. You can look at your energy bills. You can see exactly what you're paying. And I'm paying significantly less than I was to run a gas boiler. Now, one of the questions that people always ask is, I'm going to make an investment. Should I get batteries and solar or should I get a heat pump? My answer to everybody is get batteries and solar first. If you can only afford to do one or the other, do batteries and solar. That will make the biggest impact on how much money you're sending out every month to the energy companies. And then take that money, maybe over the course of the next couple of years, and invest that into a heat pump. But if I was going to do it again, I would do batteries and solar first before I did the heat pump. So we're on track to have a net zero energy bill this year. And we're not exactly living like hermits. We keep our house at 20 degrees during the winter. At this time of the year, all we do is set the heat pump back to 16 degrees, which is effectively off because the inside of the house is always more than 16 degrees. We've spent a little bit of money just fixing a few insulation problems. We noticed that the roof in our ensuite next to our bedroom, there was some heat escaping there. And I also noticed that my loft hatch wasn't sufficiently insulated. So actually heat was getting up through the loft hatch into the loft. So we've spent a little bit of money just fixing a few things there. But come the end of this year, we won't pay the energy company a single penny to run our house for the entire year. And that includes 2 electric cars, the heat pump, running everything in the house as normal. As I say, we don't live the lives of hermits. We even have a hot tub sitting over there, which uses somewhere in the region of 7 to 10 kilowatt hours a day. And we're still not going to pay a penny for our energy. So let me ask you a question. If you don't have a heat pump today, what is your biggest concern about switching to a heat pump? Is it the cost to run it? Is it that it won't keep your house warm? Is it the noise? Or is it something completely different? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to know what it's going to cost to run for the full year, you're interested in the numbers, then please do subscribe. And I say I'll be back regularly with content about the heat pump, but certainly at the 9-month period and at the 12-month period. And at the 12-month period, I'll give you all of the stats, all of the numbers for the entire year, so you can make your own decision. Now, if you're interested in getting a heat pump from Octopus, then please do check out the referral codes that are down in the description below. I'll pop a QR code up on the screen here. This will take you to my link tree, and in there you'll find affiliate codes, referral codes for Octopus. Now, if you do use the referral code from Octopus to get a heat pump, not only will you get a £100 discount, they will also give me £100, and I will take that £100 and I will add it to our charity pot for the year. And for those that don't know, what we're doing here is all of the money that we save this year, beyond not paying the energy company, we're going to give all of that money plus all of the money that we make from YouTube this year to charity. And all of the referrals, any Amazon affiliate links, anything like that, all go into that charity pot. And if you want to keep up with how that's doing, then please do join my live stream. I live stream at least once a month, usually on the first Tuesday of every single month. And then in that stream, I'll give you and the rest of the community an update on how we're doing. That's it for this video. I hope this has been useful. I hope the detail's in there, but I'm sure I've missed something. If you have a question, hit me up in the comments below. It just remains for me to say thank you for joining me. And if I'm lucky, I'll see you back here real soon for another video. Take care. Bye-bye.